Hi, welcome back to this UDK time attack tutorial. Let's just do a quick catch up on what we've been doing so far. This is my terrain which I've created. I've added textures. I've added a road. I've also added my vehicle with a camera which tracks it. We have a brush set up as a starting point. We also have, very importantly, added all of these path nodes into the level, which will act as checkpoints as we move around. If we have a quick look at the Kismet so far, we've basically had the player spawn inside the vehicle, then attached the camera and set the camera target to the vehicle, to the player. So if I click play now, what you get is just a simple car vehicle that you can drive around an open world effectively. Right, so we now need to start coding in some of the gameplay elements, and to do this we need to think about the logic that we need to apply to the game. I know that this path node here is path node 1, and if I look in the scene itself, I can actually double click on path node 1 and it will take me to that path node. As I click on the remaining path nodes, 3, 4, 5, 6, see 7's over there, 8 is over there, and we have 9 there, or 0 in this case, and that was that happened because we copied and pasted the path nodes, and every time we copied or pasted the path node, it was path node 0 that we were dragging around, and it was leaving the rest of them underneath. We could have avoided that by just right clicking and adding add in path node at every location on the for a checkpoint. But we don't have to worry about it because we can just address this in the code at a later point. So now let's have a little think about how the rules of this game are going to work. The idea is that the car will pass, will reach a checkpoint, and the checkpoint, there should be something to identify each one of these as a checkpoint, which we're going to kind of use from using in the content browser, accessing the skeletal meshes. You can see there's a flag. We can add a carrot. We're going to add this flag. I'm going to drop it in there so you can just see what I mean. So I've got this flag, and this flag is going to basically be an indication of which checkpoint I'm on. I'm just going to lift it a little bit out of the floor like that. So ideally what we want to do is just like drive into that flag, but there's a possibility that you just might miss the flag, and which would make the game, it had an element of difficulty, I guess. But what we want to do is, certainly going through the starting line, we want this whole area to act as a trigger, as I pass this line, as I pass this point here. We want to tell the game that the player has reached the end, or has got past the starting line. So we're going to create a trigger volume, an invisible volume in the game that will act as a trigger for our player to when he reaches the checkpoints. So I'm quite comfortable with the size of this trigger box here. What I haven't done in the code for this demo, or for this tutorial, is rotate this cube. So as this cube, or this volume, moves from this location to another location, the issue is that when it's facing sort of east or west, it will be side onto the camera. So I'm sticking with a cube to keep it sort of nice and even between, irrespective of where we are and on the road. So I'm quite happy with this volume size here. I've just kind of modeled it myself. I could make it wider and play about this. It's size, but I'm quite happy with that. So to create the trigger volume, on the left hand menu here you can see there's two volumes in this section, this add special brush or add volume. Click for options. So we click that one, have a look here at dynamic trigger volume. We want this one, not the trigger volume. We want a dynamic trigger volume. Okay, once I've got that, I'm just going to move my brush. So just pressing spacebar to, I can actually rescale that brush down to its original size. And you can see it's left behind this blue. You can see persistent level dot dynamic trigger volume 0. This is the box. This is the volume that the car will make will perform an overlap event with. Excuse me. The car will overlap with that trigger volume, causing an event. The game engine is listening out for that event to occur. The overlap event between this mesh and this volume. So with the brush and the flag in place, or the volume and the flag in place, we can start looking at our Kismet. We don't need the content in browser anymore. I'm quite happy with everything there. My scene, I should now have a dynamic. Yeah, you won't see it yet, of course not. Right. Let's go into Kismet, and we'll start here. I'm just going to zoom out a bit and just give myself some room. Let's put that to the side. I'm going to need to add a few things into my level to into my Kismet from the world, so that I can reference them in the game or in the code. So I've highlighted the trigger volume here, and I'm going to do a right click and new object variable using dynamic trigger volume. We will use this later. I also have the flag highlighted now. I can right click on that one. So obviously these are the two things I'm going to move. So not new object variable using skeletal mesh actor. And we also need to do an event here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go straight through the code. I'm going to go, I'm going to go as fast as I can, and just put the script together. Once I've done that, I'll come back and explain what each bit of the code is doing. But so that you can follow along without listening to me rambling on, which I am doing now, you can quite happily sort of follow this code through, and you'll see where each one of these each bit of this script comes from. So just to get the ball rolling though, I'm gonna left click on this dynamic trigger volume and right click in Kismet, and instead of adding a volume a variable using dynamic trigger volume, I'm going to add a new event. This is an event that the game engine is listening for. And I'm listening for a touch event. So this will act as the start of my code. So we'll explain this sort of later on. Okay. So I think that's everything I need. I just wanted to pick up a reference to this path node here, path node 1. We will need a reference to that later on. So new object variable using path node 1. So the one on the start line. Right, so to get started, we're going to need a few variables for our checkpoint system. So I'm going to right click, new variable, new integer, int, and I'm going to rename this CP underscore count. Okay, right click, new variable, integer. This is CP amount. There's a different way of using this, but I'll come back to that. We have 9 checkpoints in our level, so I'm going to change that to a 9. I think that's right, and we can test this later. We start off on checkpoint 1. So we want the checkpoint count to move directly to 2 at the trigger. So let's change this to 1. That should do it. So let's right click here, new condition, comparison, compare integer. Left click, left control and click, touched to in, right click, new variable, new name variable in persistent level, CP count, A, right click, new variable, persistent level, amount, B. So the link there, so it's comparing A and B. We're looking for a value that's less, where CP count is less than amount. We also need a list here, an object list or an array. You might be more familiar with. So new variable object list. Now in this object list we're going to have our path nodes. So I'm going to take a reference of this. I'm going to Control C here, so copy that and select your object list. In the sequence variable object list, click add new item and paste that in there. We have 9 checkpoints, I believe. So let's just add 9 items to the table. 8, 9, and I am going to paste this in for every one of these, like so, and I'm just going to change the value of 1 to represent each of the checkpoints or the path nodes. 7, 8, and we didn't have a 9, we had a 0. Okay, so I've got 0 to 8, 9 path nodes. We also give this one a name. Oh, wrong thing scrolling. So sequence variable name. This is my checkpoints. Okay, so this is a variable of an array which contains all the links, all the checkpoints in there. I'm going to add a new action object list, access object list, and connect A less than B to @index. Right click, new variable object, name variable in persistent level. We've named it checkpoints. Drag that to there. Right click, new variable, name variable in persistent level, CP count. We're at checkpoint number 1. Let's add that to there. And then right click on object output, create new object variable, like so. We'll give that a variable name. This is going to be current underscore CP, like so. That should output this checkpoint or the relevant checkpoint and all its properties. So next thing to do is to teleport. So action actor teleport. We're going to move a couple of things that we added. So we're going to teleport here, the skeletal mesh and the dynamic trigger volume. Let's bring these in. The skeletal mesh is in, and that. We move those 2 targets to the destination of the current CP. So new variable persistent level current CP. I could just link that to there, but I'm just gonna keep things tidy. Then we're gonna add 1 to the checkpoint count. So new action math add int, and we are gonna add the checkpoint count. Right click, new variable, variable persistent level checkpoint count from there, and new variable integer int from there. We want this to be 1. Don't need to name it. It's just adding 1 to my CP count. Where do we store that result? We store it back in CP count. Then we add a delay just to keep things moving, ticking along. Miscellaneous delay. Drag, drop that to the start there. Does that select? That'll do. Okay. That will take us through the first, and we can test this. Should we just save our level, save our current level, make sure we got the Kismet saved, and click the play button. Okay, so the flag has moved, and it has moved too far, is it? Alright. Let's see if that moves now. Ah, forgotten to do something. There we go. That's what debugging's for, testing and debugging. Dynamic trigger volume 0 touched, it's set to only work once. Maximum trigger count once, it can only touch it once. If I set it to 0, it sets it to an infinite amount. It doesn't matter how many times. I could set it to the precise number of times that I'll need that trigger box, but I'm just gonna be lazy and not add up. It's not lazy, it's just, yeah, it's working. So that will work now. Do you want to see it? I know you do. Okay, it seems to have worked. Seems far. Okay, yeah. So, and that'll take me all the way around the level now, with the trigger box moving. What I've noticed about this car is that if you hit the turbo boost, the car drives faster than it did before. Now, as I come to this trigger box, it doesn't do anything, because we haven't coded it in, and that's what we're going to do now. So what we need to do is tell the script that the player has made one entire lap of the course. What it's doing here is it's adding 1 to CP count. We get to this list here, it gets to the bottom of this list, and then we are no longer less than the amount of checkpoints. If it was, it would try to add 1 to the checkpoint count, and we haven't got a 10th. We haven't got a 10th checkpoint, so we need to tell it to go back to the start of this list. Okay, so we're gonna do 2 laps of this course. So let's create some new variables. So new integer. This one is going to be laps, like so, and another one here just to compare it against. New variable integer. This will be my max laps. That's like that. So what happens when checkpoint count is equal to checkpoint amount? Well, we're gonna set. We're gonna do something. We're gonna add it. No, we're not. We're going to set the integer to. We're going to set CP count back to 0, which is. It's not. Miscellaneous, isn't it? Miss. And I could be wrong. It's not. It is. Vehicle toggle. Set variable. There it is. Integer. Okay, so we're going to set the CP count back to 0. So when that is equal to this value, new variable. Actually, we just want a 0 in here. So create new variable 0. New variable in player position level and CP count. So that basically resets the position of the checkpoint to here. So that's probably what it wants to be. Maybe that needs to be a 1 because we're at 0. No, that's right. Yes, because 0 in the list is 0. It's path node 1. Then we are going to add 1 to the number of laps. So action math add int there. Then we take our laps, new variable. We'll do that now. New variable, persistent level. We take our laps and we add that to. We add 1 to that. So let's right click there. I'm going to add 1 to U. Store the value back in laps like that. It's a little bit cumbersome, but that'll do. Actually, let's just so we can see what's going on properly. Next thing we're going to do is check that we haven't exceeded the maximum number of laps. So again, it's a simple new condition comparison, compare the integer. Let's drag it onto there. We are testing to see that laps is less than max laps. So new, oh crikey, new variable, persistent level max laps. Drag that to there. Then if it is less than the maximum laps, we are going to teleport the checkpoint, the flag, and so basically this stuff here. Control Alt, drag a box over that box there. Control C, Control V, drag that up there. Let's break that connection. So if you're less than this, we are going to, rather than move you to the current checkpoint. Oh, will that work? Yeah, that probably will, won't it? We don't really need to reference that path node 1. We can just change it because we've already set the TP count back to 0, so there, that will do that. Let's add another delay in here. Miscellaneous delay at the start. And to get this working again, basically to keep this thing from, so when that's finished, we are going to loop back around to this comparison here. Okay, so we've reset. We know that this is less than, so we go to start again, move that to that. Okay, let's see if that works with this. So again, once again, save, click play. Yeah, see how I moved a bit slower. We haven't used a turbo boost. Giving you tips for winning the game. Okay. Brake doesn't like braking, does it? Okay, so we come into contact with this one, and it doesn't move. Moving it, yeah, see, so we probably, it has moved to the right location. But it didn't do it immediately. If I just break that link there, break all links, we're going to bring in, let's make this bigger, path node 1, and see if that does it. We'll just test that first. Okay, so with that done, of course. No. Okay. Oh, died. Right. So obviously, this is where the debugging skills come into play. The current lap is set to 1, so we got CP count is currently set to 1. So it moves it to the second checkpoint. We want to change this. It does move its path. It should move that to path node 1 when that's done. Interesting. This is set to 0, so it moves it back to there. Is there a reason that max lap to 0? Of course, you fool. Max lap should be 2, because when it's comparing here, this is equal, it doesn't do this. So it actually would have probably worked with break all links. That would have worked, wouldn't it? Same thing, exactly the same thing. We'll just quickly test this. Sorry about that. Let's keep things moving on a bit. Wow, it's so difficult to control. Let's rebuild our lighting. So as we come into translate this on, it just has a delay. There was a little delay there. That 1 second delay, maybe I can get rid of that delay. And it's on the second lap. So what I was saying about the rotation, you can see that the flag doesn't actually rotate. And there we go. So that was, I had to go over that one twice, I think. Actually, no, now I'm going to be on the second lap, or the third lap. So laps will now be on 2. And it will loop around anyway because we haven't basically told it not to. So you haven't got your delay this time. It stops moving. So that is the main logic taken care of. What I need to do now is add the timer. So I'll just pause the video at this point. Give you a quick look at that. Actually, I'll just tidy this up here so you can see what's happening. So these are my variables. Control Alt, press C to comment. Global variables. We probably want to move this down so you can keep this tidy. Okay. Control Alt. And this is. Yeah, control, just see that. This is move trigger volume. Okay, and let's move these up slightly. Control Alt, let's select everything. Like so. With a line straight through it, and we can get rid of this. Control Alt, press C there. Add lap or check lap number. Okay. So I did say I was going to explain what's happening here. Just so just to summarize this part of the code up, I've created these global variables. Integers are just whole numbers. This this array here actually contains. I can put anything in an array. Yeah. So you know, in this case, we're referencing path nodes, and we just want to have them in a sequence, in an order. So what happens is when we touch this trigger volume, and this trigger volume sends a touched a touched event. So you can have most objects in the game have a set of different listeners attached to them or associated with them. So a lot of things like the touched events, or destroy, take damage, hit wall, depending on what particular object you're using. So our trigger volume only has two, a touched and taking damage. So once we have an overlap event, this touched event here is an overlap event. We could have an untouched, which is after we've entered the trigger volume, entered the volume. Once we've left that volume, that would be an untouched event, or an empty event when multiple things sort of leave the event. I believe that is. So this touched leads into this comparison here, and we are checking that CP count, which is 1, is less than the CP amount. This CP amount I've set to 9 here. Basically that represents 9 objects in this list, and that's kind of cheating. That's poor coding. That effectively what I should do here, if I was a good coder, would be to take the value. Like I can count how many objects are in this list automatically. I don't need to tell it there's 9. The game engine already knows that there's 9, or the Kismet knows that there's 9 objects in that. So I just don't know the code to actually find out what the number of the number of checkpoints are in that object list. So I just added 9. I hard coded it in. It's not good because I could add a checkpoint in here, and I would have to manually change that number there. Really what we want to do is, if we add a checkpoint or remove a checkpoint from the level, it would automatically know that the checkpoint number is changed. So that's a little bit of an insight on what's going on there. Then we access the object list here. This is us accessing this array with our checkpoints in. So I'm telling it which array to access. We could have multiple arrays in this code, and we've got this one here called checkpoints. We're accessing it at the index of CP count. CP count on the first pass, on the first overlap event, it's set to 1. So it access the first thing in the list. Okay, which is that it doesn't start at 0, it starts at 1. Okay, so access the first thing in the list. Actually, it does start. It was already set to 1. So basically, then it will trigger 1. We'll all be in contact. So we'll move to 2, I think. Yes, it's a little bit of a little ambiguous, I think. What does it do here? Well, it outputs an object. It outputs that path node. So whichever checkpoint count, whichever path node we are on at that given time, it outputs the reference to that path node. And this actual variable contains all the details of a path node. So if we looked at the properties of a path node, can we do that? Path node properties. It has access to all of this detail here. So anything that relates to this path node, such as its location in space, its x and y coordinates, exact precise x and y coordinates, I might point out, and its rotation, which we've not taken into account. Those details can then be accessed because this object has been pulled out. Okay, and what we're trying to do is actually teleport. Again, this is there's another term for this is to set the transform which is something we can actually do in Kismet as well. We can move an object to a rather than teleport it, we can set its transform and move it to a physical location. But I just teleport was like a shortcut. It seemed quite simple to use. So we take the skeletal mesh and we take the trigger volume and we move it to the location of the current CP, that object current CP. And you can see the variables just looks like this is actually a global variable. So really that's naughty. I should break this. I should have this up here with all my other global variables, so you know what's what, and then I should reference that like that really. New variable, say checkpoints, yeah. So you can see that when you add a reference to this global variable, it will look like this. So it moves the skeletal mesh and the trigger volume, and then we add 1 to the checkpoint count, so we move to the next point in our checkpoints list, or that's the idea here. But before we've added 1, and then we basically by triggering the dynamic trigger volume, remember we set this to max trigger count 0, this is moved to the new location, and we automatically trigger this again the next time we come into contact with it. So it does this part of the script again, so it checks to see whether or not CP count is less than CP amount. When they are equal, we are then going to check that when they are equal, we're actually on the last we're in the last point in our list. We're on the last checkpoint path node 0 in this case. So we want to tell the object list to reset. We want to tell this loop to reset. So we set the checkpoint count back to 0. We add 1 to laps, and then we're going to test that we haven't gone through 3 laps here. So comparing the laps to max laps. If it's less than, then we can teleport the skeletal mesh and the dynamic trigger volume to the current CP, which has now been set to 0, the first checkpoint. And then, so this delay is a little bit long. Set to 1, I'm going to set it to 0.2. Okay, and that is basically it. That is our basic loop setup. And so next what we're going to do is look at the timer. So I'm going to pause the video here, and I'll come back when I'll just save things first. You know, I like to do that. In fact, let's have a quick race. We'll go out on a race. Let's see. Yeah, things are broken now. I've destroyed it. Yeah, things don't look good here now. I've got checkpoints. That's all I changed, wasn't it? Is it? Did I change? I didn't change anything apart from that object, that delay. Change that back to 1. Delays are there to stop things from being missed, like trigger boxes, and it's not the cause of the problem. What is the cause of the problem? CP count. Have I unhooked any of these? No. No. Maybe it didn't like that. Maybe it didn't like that. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And there you go. so we can't add it in there as a global variable. But look what I mean at the about the speed of the car. It's quite slow there. I'll tell you what it is my frame count is dropped because of the recording, but it doesn't explain why it now speeds up again. See, it has moved. Because I've just thrown the delay back to a second. There you go. Right, yeah, I'm going to pause the video there. Yeah, sorry about that. The current CP can't be moved back into global variables. We just need to know that it is a global variable. I just put these in a little box here just to find them again. But yeah, you need to be aware, maybe add it there as a object variable. Okay, so thank you for watching.